Let's be honest. If you were stripped naked, disarmed, and told to run for your life across a cactus-filled plain while 300 warriors chased you with spears, you wouldn't be thinking about survival. You'd be thinking about how much it's gonna hurt when they catch you. But John Colter wasn't you, and he certainly wasn't normal. The year was 1808. The location was the Three Forks of the Missouri River, a place so beautiful it looked like heaven, and so dangerous it was actually hell's front porch. This was Blackfeet territory, and the Blackfeet didn't just dislike trespassers, they erased them. Colter knew the risks. He was a veteran of the Lewis and Clark expedition, a man who had walked across the continent and back, while most men were still figuring out how to saddle a horse. He was tough, he was smart, but on a crisp autumn morning, his luck finally ran dry. He was paddling a canoe up the Jefferson River with a partner named John Potts. They were trapping beaver, trying to make a fortune in fur. The river was calm, the air was silent. Too silent. Suddenly, the banks of the river exploded with noise. Hundreds of Blackfeet warriors emerged from the brush, weapons drawn, screaming war cries that curdled the blood. They motioned for the canoe to come to shore. Colter, sitting in the back, did the math instantly. 2 men, 300 warriors, no cover. "Don't resist," Colter whispered to Potts. "If we surrender, maybe they'll just rob us. If we fight, we're dead." He paddled to the bank. He stepped out, dropping his rifle. He surrendered. But Potts panicked. He stayed in the canoe, shaken, clutching his rifle like a lifeline. A warrior stepped into the water and tried to snatch the gun. Potts fired. The warrior fell dead. For a split second, there was silence. Then the sky turned black with arrows. Colter watched in horror as his partner was turned into a pincushion. Potts was riddled with so many arrows he didn't even fall over. He just slumped, pinned to the canoe. Now, Colter was alone. 300 angry men turned their eyes to him. They had just seen their brother killed. They didn't want to just kill Colter. That would be too easy. They wanted entertainment. They stripped him, boots, coat, shirt, pants, everything. He stood there, naked as the day he was born, shivering in the biting Montana wind. He waited for the knife. He waited for the fire. Instead, the chief walked up to him. He looked Colter up and down, assessing his muscles, his legs. He pointed to the open plain stretching out towards the horizon. "Run," the chief signaled. Colter didn't understand at first. Then he saw the young warriors lining up, dropping their heavy robes, gripping their spears. They were smiling. This wasn't an execution. It was a race. And John Colter was the rabbit.
Colter didn't ask questions. He didn't beg for his boots. He knew the Blackfeet culture well enough to understand the game. This was the human hunt. They were giving him a head start. Maybe 150 yards, the distance of a decent rifle shot, before they unleashed the pack. It wasn't mercy, it was arrogance. They wanted to see him sweat before he bled. He turned and walked away. He forced himself not to run immediately, preserving his dignity for just a few seconds longer. He walked past the line of young braves who were stretching their limbs, laughing, betting on who would take his scalp. When he reached the designated mark, the chief let out a sharp cry. Colter exploded. He didn't run like a man. He ran like a frightened deer. He was 35 years old, hardened by years of trapping in the Rockies, lungs conditioned by thin mountain air. But he had never run like this. The ground was his first enemy. The Montana plain wasn't a grassy track. It was a torture chamber of prickly pear cactus, sharp flint rocks, and hidden gopher holes. Within the first 100 yards, the soles of his feet were shredded. Cactus spines drove deep into his flesh, snapping off. Sharp stones sliced his heels. But Colter couldn't feel it. Adrenaline is a powerful anesthetic. His world narrowed down to a single instinct: move. Behind him, the air shattered. 300 warriors screamed the war whoop, a terrifying rhythmic shriek that signaled the start of the hunt. He heard the pounding of moccasined feet hitting the earth. He heard the rattling of spears. He didn't look back. Looking back costs you a split second, and a split second was the difference between life and a slow, agonizing death by fire. His target was the Madison River, about 5 miles away. 5 miles. On a track, that's a distance a good runner covers in 30 minutes. Naked, bleeding, across broken terrain, with an army of killers breathing down your neck, it's an eternity. He pushed his body past the red line. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. His lungs burned as if he were inhaling smoke. The wind whipped his naked skin, drying the sweat instantly, chilling him to the bone despite the exertion. Mile 1 passed in a blur of agony. Mile 2. He was actually gaining ground. Most of the Blackfeet were falling behind, surprised by the sheer desperate speed of the white trapper. But not all of them. Colter risked a glance over his shoulder. It was a mistake, but he had to know. Most of the pack was scattered, a few hundred yards back. But one warrior, a young brave carrying a heavy spear, was sprinting ahead of the rest. He was close, maybe 100 yards, and he looked fresh. He looked like he was enjoying this. Colter realized with a sinking dread that he wasn't just racing a tribe, he was racing a champion, and his legs were beginning to fail. Blood from his nose, burst capillaries from the exertion, began to spray across his chest, mixing with the dust. He was literally running himself to death.
5 miles is a long way when your lungs are full of blood. The Madison River was still miles away. Colter's vision was blurring. The blood from his nose was choking him, spattering across his chest like war paint. But he could hear the footsteps behind him. They were light, rhythmic, and getting louder. Thump, thump, thump. He knew he couldn't outrun this one. The young brave was too fast, too fresh. If Colter kept running, he would take a spear in the back within minutes. So John Colter did the only thing that made sense in a world gone mad. He stopped. He didn't slow down, he slammed on the brakes. He spun around, planting his bleeding feet in the dirt, and threw his hands up in the air. "Whew!" Colter screamed. It was a guttural, desperate noise, half challenge, half plea for mercy. The young warrior wasn't expecting it. He was sprinting full tilt, spear raised for the kill. When his prey suddenly stopped and screamed, it shocked him. He tried to stop, but momentum carried him forward. He stumbled. In his surprise, he threw the spear. It was a bad throw. The heavy iron-tipped spear hit the ground in front of Colter, the shaft snapping in two from the force of the impact. Colter didn't hesitate. Survival isn't about hesitation. He dove for the broken spearhead. The warrior was still trying to regain his balance, scrambling to get up. He never made it. Colter drove the jagged, broken shaft into the man's chest. He pinned him to the Montana dirt. It was brutal. It was fast. It was necessary. Colter didn't stay to watch the light fade from the boy's eyes. He snatched the warrior's blanket, his only prize from the encounter, and turned back to the horizon. Far behind him, the main pack of Blackfeet stopped. They gathered around the fallen runner. Colter saw them pause. Then he heard the scream. It wasn't a war cry this time. It was a cry of grief and rage that shook the mountains. The game had changed. Before they were hunting for sport. Now they were hunting for vengeance. Colter wrapped the blanket around his shoulders and started running again. But now he wasn't running just for the river. He was running for a miracle. The river was his only hope, but it was also a trap. If he reached the wood, what then? He couldn't swim forever. But he remembered something, a detail from his day's trapping in this area. There was a logjam, a massive pile of driftwood caught in a bend of the river. If he could just reach the wood.
The distance to the Madison River was 5 miles. To a man in boots, on a horse, or even just walking on a Sunday stroll, 5 miles is a measurement of distance. To John Colter, naked, bleeding, and lungs shredding with every gasp, 5 miles was a measurement of pain. He was running on stumps. The soles of his feet were gone, flayed by the prickly pear cactus that carpeted the valley floor. Every step was a fresh insult to the nerves, driving thorns deeper into the meat of his heels. He left a trail of bloody footprints in the dust, a red map for the vengeance that was screaming behind him. But it didn't stop. It couldn't. The scream he had heard, the one that rose up when the tribe found their fallen champion, was not the sound of men who wanted to capture him. It was the sound of men who wanted to tear him apart with their teeth. He clutched the dead warrior's blanket to his chest. It was heavy, itching, and smelled of another man's sweat. But it was the only wealth he had in this world. If he survived the run, he would need it to survive the night. If. The river line appeared ahead, a ribbon of cottonwood trees and willows shimmering in the heat haze. It looked like salvation. It looked like the finish line. But Colter knew better. The river was just the next level of the gauntlet. He hit the tree line at a dead sprint, crashing through the underbrush, thorns tearing at his exposed skin. He didn't slow down. He burst onto the bank of the Madison River. The water was swollen, cold, and moving fast. He looked back. Through the gaps in the trees, he saw him, the dust cloud, the vanguard of the Blackfeet army. They were less than a mile behind, closing the gap with the terrifying endurance of wolves. They had seen him enter the trees. They knew he was cornered. Colter clutched the dead warrior's blanket to his chest. It was heavy, itching, and smelled of another man's sweat, but it was the only wealth he had in this world. If he survived the run, he would need it to survive the night. Then he saw it. About 30 yards downstream, a massive tangle of driftwood had snagged against a sandbar. It was a raft,
a chaotic island of logs, branches, and debris washed down from the mountains, jammed together by the current until it formed a solid floating fortress. It was a beaver's nightmare, a tangled mess of rot and timber. To anyone else, it was garbage. To John Colter, it was a castle. He didn't hesitate. He plunged into the river. The water was liquid ice, hitting his overheated body like a hammer blow. It stole the breath from his lungs. He didn't swim on the surface. He dove. He forced his battered body down, kicking against the current, swimming underwater like an otter. The silt stung his eyes. His lungs screamed for air, but he kicked harder. He swam toward the dark, looming shadow of the logjam. He reached the edge of the wood. He didn't climb on it. He swam under it. The current pushed him against the rough bark of the submerged logs. He scraped his back, his shoulders, seeking a gap. He needed a pocket of air. He clawed his way deep into the labyrinth of wet wood, fighting the claustrophobia, fighting the urge to panic. Finally, he found it. Between two massive trunks of cottonwood, held apart by a smaller branch, there was a space. He surfaced. His head broke the water, emerging into a dark, damp hollow inside the logjam. He gasped, sucking in the humid, moldy air. It smelled of rotten wood and river mud. It was pitch black, save for a few slivers of light filtering down from the layers of timber above. He was caged, the logs pressed against his chest and back. The water was up to his neck, freezing his blood. He had to tread water gently to keep his nose above the surface, careful not to disturb the debris. He was invisible, but he wasn't safe. Minutes later, the thunder arrived. He heard them before he saw them. The dull thud, thud, thud of hundreds of feet hitting the riverbank. The shouting, the splashing. They were arguing. I could hear their voices, muffled by the wood but terrifyingly close. They were debating where he had gone. Had he swum across? Had he drowned? Then the light above him flickered. Debris rained down on his head, dust, bark, loose twigs. The logjam groaned and shifted, dipping slightly into the water under a new weight. Someone was walking on the logs. Colter froze. He stopped breathing. He stopped treading water, letting his body hang suspended in the freezing current, holding on to a submerged branch with white-knuckle grip. Footsteps right above his head. Moccasins on good. Creak, step, creak. He looked up. Through a tiny chink in the driftwood, he saw a flash of movement, a foot, then the shaft of a spear poking down, probing the gaps. The spear tip slid into the water, inches from Colter's face. It thrusted blindly into the darkness of the water, searching for soft flesh. Colter pressed himself back against the slimy wood, pulling his stomach in. The spear stabbed again and again. The warrior above grunted with effort. If Colter gasped, he died. If he splashed, he died. If the spear found him, he died. He was no longer a man. He was a piece of driftwood. He was a shadow. He was nothing. The footsteps moved on, then more footsteps. The entire log jam seemed to be swarming with Blackfeet. They were running over his head, jumping from log to log, screaming in frustration. They were literally standing on top of him. For hours, the hunt continued. The sun began to dip. The water sapped the heat from his core. His teeth wanted to chatter, but he clenched his jaw until his gums bled. He drifted in and out of consciousness, kept awake only by the terror of the voices above. He wondered if this was how he would end, not in a blaze of glory,
but freezing to death in the dark under a pile of garbage while his enemies walked on his grave.
Time stops when you are holding your breath under 6 feet of rotting timber. For John Colter, the world had shrunk to a space no larger than a coffin. The logjam on the Madison River was a chaotic tangle of cottonwood trunks and willow branches, slammed together by floods and baked hard by the sun. But underneath, in the murky darkness, it was a labyrinth of snagged roots and slime. Colter had wedged himself into a small cavity between 2 massive logs. The water was up to his chin. He had to tilt his head back, pressing his nose against the rough, wet bark above, just to find a pocket of air the size of a fist. Above him, the world was ending. The vibration was the first thing he felt, a dull, rhythmic thudding traveling down through the wood and into his skull. It was the sound of hundreds of feet hitting the raft. The Blackfeet had swarmed the logjam. Colter closed his eyes in the pitch blackness. If he gasped, they would hear him. If he splashed, they would hear him. If his teeth chattered from the bone-deep cold, they would hear him. Creak. Snut. A heavy foot stepped on the log directly above his face. Dust and bits of bark rained down on his eyelashes. Then came the thrust. Splosh. A spear tip punched through a gap in the drift, plunging into the water mere inches from Colter's left shoulder. It withdrew and stabbed again, grazing the water near his ear. They were fishing, blindly stabbing into the dark, hoping to feel the soft resistance of flesh. Colter pressed himself backwards against the slimy roots, making himself thin as a sheet of paper. This continued until the sun began to dip. The water, fed by high-altitude snowmelt, leached the heat from his core. His fingers were numb. His legs felt like foreign objects, but he didn't move. He knew that patience was the only weapon he had left. He waited until the light faded completely, until the shouting moved downstream and silence returned to the wilderness. Only then did he dare to claw his way out, swimming underwater until his lungs burned, finally breaking the surface downstream. He dragged himself onto the muddy bank, naked, shivering, and alive. But as he looked east, toward the 300 miles of wilderness between him and safety, he realized the Blackfeet were the easy part. Now he faced the 3 killers that never sleep: hypothermia, starvation, and the earth itself. The human foot is a miracle of engineering, designed to carry us across the world. But it was not designed for the Gallatin Valley of 1808 without the protection of leather. When John Colter took his first step away from the riverbank, the pain was immediate and absolute. The plain wasn't just dirt. It was a hard-packed floor of gravel, flint, and the devil's own houseplant, the prickly pear cactus. These weren't scattered succulents. They were mats of low-growing, vicious pads covered in spines as long as a sewing needle and hard as steel. In the dark, they were invisible landmines. Crunch. Colter suppressed a scream as a cluster of spines drove into the soft, waterlogged arch of his right foot. He stumbled, instinctively trying to shift his weight, and stepped squarely onto another pad with his left. The thorns didn't just prick, they embedded.
They broke off deep in the meat of the soul, hooking into the nerves. He fell to his knees, clawing at his feet with numb fingers, trying to pull them out. Blood, dark and slick, began to coat his skin. But for every spine he pulled out, 3 more broke off under the skin, festering into boils of pus and blood. But he couldn't stop. To stop was to freeze. The night air dropped well below freezing. His naked body was a heat-radiating engine running out of fuel. He had to generate warmth through motion. So he stood up on his ruined feet and began to walk. He adopted a strange, lurching gait, trying to slide his feet to sweep the cactus away before putting his full weight down. It didn't work. He was walking on a carpet of needles. By dawn, he had covered maybe 10 miles. The sun rose over the mountains, bringing no relief, only a new torture. The high-altitude sun on naked skin. Colter was a mountain man, his face and hands weathered like old leather, but the rest of him, his chest, his back, his legs, was pale white. The sun hit him with ultraviolet violence. Within hours, his shoulders were turning an angry, blistering red. He had no shirt, no hat. He draped the tattered edges of the blanket around his head like a monk's cowl, creating a small tent of shade, but the wool was rough and trapped the heat against his burns. And then there was the hunger. He hadn't eaten in 48 hours. His stomach was a knotted fist of cramps that bent him double. He scanned the landscape, eyes burning from the glare. He wasn't looking for game. He had no gun, no knife, no way to kill anything faster than a tortoise. He was looking for roots. He found a patch of cerealia, prairie turnips. In the spring, they were soft. In the autumn, they were like rocks buried in concrete. He dropped to his knees, ignoring the cactus that bit into his shins, and began to dig. He had no tools. He used his fingers. He clawed at the dry, hard earth until his fingernails tore back and his fingertips bled. He unearthed a small tuberous root covered in dirt. He didn't wash it. He had no water. He bit into it. It was tough, bitter, and fibrous. It tasted like wood and dirt. But to John Colter, it was manna from heaven. He chewed it slowly, letting the meager juices coat his parched throat. He walked on. The landscape began to blur. The pain in his feet transformed from a sharp stinging to a dull, throbbing roar that synchronized with his heartbeat. Thump, thump, step, step. He looked down at his trail. He was leaving bloody footprints on the rocks. He wondered if the wolves were following him yet. He wondered if the Blackfeet were still out there, tracking the blood. "Let them come," he croaked, his voice a dry rasp. "Let them try to walk this." As the days blurred into nights, he faced the Gallatin Range. He had to cross the mountains to get to the Yellowstone River drainage. Mountains meant rock, mountains meant wind, and mountains meant snow. He climbed, naked, in the snow. He wrapped the tattered edges of the blanket around his feet, trying to fashion makeshift moccasins, but the sharp shale shredded the wool within a mile. He walked barefoot on the ice. His feet were no longer recognizable as human appendages.
They were swollen lumps of purple and black flesh, oozing pus from the infected cactus wounds, cracked and bleeding from the cold. He couldn't feel his toes anymore. Frostbite had set in, turning them waxy and gray. He hallucinated. He saw Potts walking beside him, riddled with arrows, asking why he had surrendered. He saw fires that weren't there. He reached out for phantom cups of coffee, only to grab handfuls of snow. He was a skeleton wrapped in sunburnt skin, a ghost haunting his own life. "Just 1 foot," he whispered to the wind. "Just 1 more step."
On the 8th day, the sentries at Manuel's Fort Raymond on the Bighorn River, saw something coming out of the tree line. At first, they thought it was a bear walking on its hind legs. It moved with a lumbering, broken rhythm, swaying from side to side. Then, as it got closer, they thought it was an Indian, perhaps a decoy sent to lure them out. The figure was dark with sun and dirt, matted with hair, a terrifying silhouette against the afternoon sun. The alarm was raised, the gates were barred. Men scrambled to the wooden palisades, leveling their flintlock rifles. "Halt!" the sentry bellowed, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Identify yourself!" The creature stopped about 100 yards out. It swayed. It raised a hand that looked more like a claw. The fingers curled and blackened. It opened its mouth, but no sound came out. It licked its cracked, bleeding lips and tried again. Don't shoot," the voice rasped. It sounded like 2 stones grinding together, weak and carried away by the wind. "It's me, Colter." The men on the wall lowered their guns. They squinted. There was something familiar about the set of the shoulders, the stubborn way the head was held high, despite the body failing. "Colter?" a whisper. "Open the gate! My God, open the gate!" Men rushed out. They ran to him. As they got close, the smell hit them, the overpowering stench of rotting flesh, old sweat, and gangrene. Colter looked at them with eyes that had seen the other side of hell. He was a skeleton dipped in wax. His ribs protruded sharply. His skin was peeling in great sheets from the sunburn. But his feet were the stuff of nightmares. They were swollen to twice their normal size, embedded with hundreds of thorns, black with dried blood and dirt. "John," a trapper named Drouillard gasped, catching him as his legs finally gave out. "Where have you been? Where is Potts?" Colter collapsed into their arms. He felt the rough wool of their coats. He smelled the tobacco and the gunpowder, the smells of civilization. He looked up at the sky, tears streaming silently down his face, cutting tracks through the grime. Not from pain, but from the realization that he didn't have to take another step. "Potts is dead," Colter whispered, his head lolling back. "And I went for a run." They carried him inside like a broken doll. They laid him on a bunk in the barracks. Someone brought water. Someone brought warm soup. They cut away the remnants of the blanket that had fused to his skin. The camp doctor looked at his feet and swore softly. He spent the next 3 hours pulling cactus spines out of Colter's soles with a pair of pliers. It was a brutal procedure. Colter didn't scream. He didn't have the strength. He just lay there, staring at the timber ceiling, listening to the fire crackle, proving to every man in that fort that the human body can endure things that should kill a horse. He slept for 20 hours. When he woke up, he wiggled his toes. They hurt. God, they hurt. But they moved. He had cheated death.
They say trauma makes a man cautious. They say a man who touches fire learns to fear the heat. For John Colter, it just made him angry. He healed. It took weeks. The flesh on his feet grew back, scarred and tough as rawhide. The sunburn peeled away to reveal new, harder skin. But the memory of the run didn't fade. It haunted him. It called him. He would wake up in the middle of the night, sweating, hearing the war whoops, feeling the cactus spines. Most men would have taken that survival as a divine hint to retire. They would have packed their bags, headed east to St. Louis, and never looked at a mountain again. But the wilderness is an addiction, and John Colter was a junkie. In the spring of 1810, less than 2 years after his naked marathon, Colter did the unthinkable. He didn't go east, he went west. Back to the Three Forks, back to the very heart of Blackfeet territory. He signed on to guide a new expedition led by Andrew Henry. He told himself it was for the money. He told himself it was to retrieve the traps he had lost. But deep down, he knew the truth. He wanted to look the devil in the eye one more time. He wanted to prove that he wasn't just a survivor, he was a conqueror. They rode into the valley heavily armed. Colter wasn't naked this time. He wore thick buckskins, carried a heavy caliber rifle, and rode a good horse. He wasn't the prey anymore. He was the guide. But the land has a memory too. The Blackfeet were waiting. They hadn't forgotten the white man who ran like an antelope. They hadn't forgotten the insult of his survival. It happened at dawn. The attack was sudden and overwhelming. Hundreds of warriors poured over the ridge, a wave of painted fury. Arrows filled the air like angry wasps. But this time, the white men didn't surrender. They dug in behind their log breastworks and opened fire. Colter fought with a cold, terrifying precision. He wasn't fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for closure. He moved through the smoke and chaos like a phantom, his rifle cracking, reloading, cracking again. He saw the faces of the men trying to kill him. Thwack! An arrow slammed into the log inches from his face. Bang! Then luck ran out. In the heat of the battle, a bullet, or perhaps an arrow, struck him in the leg. The same leg that had carried him 300 miles to safety. He went down. The pain was blinding. He dragged himself behind a log, reloading, blood soaking into the dirt. He lay there, listening to the screams of battle, and he realized something. He was pushing his luck. He was gambling with chips he didn't have. The wilderness had let him go once. It wouldn't be so generous again. "I promised God," he whispered to a companion as they held the line, his face smeared with black powder. "I promised that if he let me live through that run, I'd leave this place. I'm breaking my promise." The expedition managed to repel the attack, but Colter was done. He looked at the mountains one last time. They were beautiful. They were deadly. They were a graveyard waiting to be filled. "I'm leaving," he told the others, binding his wound. "I'm going to St. Louis, and I'm never running again." He
He went back to civilization. He traded his rifle for a plow, his moccasins for leather boots, and the silence of the mountains for the bustle of a growing city. In 1810, John Colter did what no mountain man was supposed to do. He retired. He bought a farm near Hugh, Missouri, on a bluff overlooking the river. He married a woman named Sally. He had a son. For 3 years, the man who had outran an army of Blackfeet warriors woke up every morning, not to the scream of a war whoop, but to the crow of a rooster. He drank coffee from a china cup, not muddy river water from a cupped hand. He slept in a feather bed, not a snowbank. But the transition wasn't easy. You don't just turn off the instincts of a survivor. He would catch himself scanning the tree line for movement. He would tense up at sudden noises. And he couldn't help but tell his stories. He sat on his porch in the evenings, smoking his pipe, telling his neighbors about the land he had seen out west. He spoke of geysers that shot boiling water hundreds of feet into the air, shaking the ground. He spoke of mud pots that bubbled like a witch's cauldron and smelled of sulfur. He spoke of a land where the earth itself was on fire and the rivers steamed. The neighbors listened, and then they laughed. They nudged each other. They called him a liar. They mockingly named this imaginary place Colter's Hell. "Poor John," they would say, "spent too much time in the sun, sees fire coming out of the ground." They didn't know he was describing what we now call Yellowstone National Park. They didn't understand that a man who had survived what Colter survived had no reason to lie. The truth was stranger than any fiction they could comprehend. Colter didn't argue. He knew what he had seen. He knew what was real. He missed the mountains, the purity of them, but he loved the safety. He loved the feel of solid ground that wasn't trying to kill him. He loved his wife. He loved his son. But deep down, in the quiet moments of the night, he must have wondered. You don't cheat death that many times without death taking it personally. You don't steal a life from the Blackfeet without incurring a debt.
In November 1813, the bill finally arrived. It didn't come with a painted face and a lance. It didn't come with the claws of a grizzly bear or the bite of a rattlesnake. It came silently from within. John Colter caught jaundice. It seems like a cruel joke. The man who ran naked across cactus, swam under ice-cold log jams, climbed snowy peaks barefoot, and fought off ambushes was being taken down by a liver infection. A microscopic enemy he couldn't shoot, couldn't stab, couldn't outrun. As he lay in his bed, his skin turning a sickly yellow, his strength fading day by day, he looked around the room. He saw the solid timber walls of his home, walls he had built. He saw the fire crackling safely in the hearth. He saw his wife, Sally, holding his hand, her eyes filled with tears. He realized then that this wasn't a defeat, it was the ultimate victory. The wilderness had tried to kill him. The Blackfeet had tried to kill him. The cold, the hunger, the river, the mountains, they had all took their best shot, and they had all missed. He wasn't dying alone in a ditch, scalped and forgotten, his bones picked clean by wolves. He wasn't dying frozen in a snowdrift. He was dying on his terms,
He was dying a free man, a father, and a husband in a bed that he owned on land that he tilled. He had won the race. On May 7th, 1813, or thereabouts, just before he died, he reportedly told a friend about the promise he made to God during that run on the Madison River. He had kept his end of the bargain. He had left the mountains, and in return, he got to die warm. John Colter took his last breath and slipped away, leaving behind a legend that would outlive the stone markers on his grave. A legend of grit, of endurance, and of the sheer, unbreakable will to live. So the next time you think you're having a bad day because the Wi-Fi is slow, or the traffic is bad, or your coffee is cold, remember John Colter. Remember the man who stood naked on the Montana plains, looked at an army of 300 killers, and decided that today was a good day to go for a run. You wouldn't last 5 minutes in his world, but thanks to men like him, you don't have to.